CEO brings a random girl as a fake date to his ex-gala, but everyone's shocked when she outshines every Harris in the room. The morning rush was already in full swing at Clover and Steam, a cozy little cafe nestled between glass towers in Midtown Manhattan. Baristas hustled behind the counter, the scent of espresso thick in the air, while the line of impatient customers snaked toward the door. Rachel moved quickly between tables, balancing a tray of oat milk lattes and half-eaten croissants, her blonde ponytail swinging behind her. Her apron was smudged with coffee, but her movements were sharp, efficient. She had been up since 5. Again. At table 3, a man in an overpriced coat was snapping his fingers in irritation. "I said no foam," he barked at a younger barista, a girl barely out of high school, who flinched under his gaze. "Do you even understand English?" The girl mumbled an apology, shrinking into herself. Rachel heard it from across the room. She set down her tray and walked over. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. "This," the man gestured with disgust at his cup, "is not what I ordered, and if your staff cannot follow basic instructions, then perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the 5-star restaurant down the street," Rachel interrupted, folding her arms. "We serve coffee, not ego." The man's face reddened. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm the one telling you to stop harassing my coworker," she said, "and if you want your coffee remade, ask like a decent human being. Otherwise, there's the door." Silence swept over the cafe. A few customers turned in their seats, quietly watching. The barista behind Rachel stared at her, like she had just been handed a sword. Then a voice cut through the tension. "You just cost your job." Rachel turned to find a tall man in a tailored coat standing by the counter, coffee in hand, eyes cool and unreadable. He was sharply dressed, effortlessly composed, and unmistakably out of place in a cafe like this. "And who the hell are you?" she shot back, jaw tight. The man took a slow sip of his espresso. "Tyler Crane." Rachel blinked, as in Crane Capital, as in Wall Street's youngest shark in a 3-piece suit, as in the guy on the cover of Forbes last month. She straightened slightly. "Well then, Mr. Crane, I suppose your morning just got a little more entertaining." He smiled, just barely. "Or enlightening," she arched an eyebrow. "You're really going to get me fired for defending someone?" "No," he said, stepping closer, "but most people in your position would have kept their head down. You didn't." Rachel shrugged. "Then I guess this place doesn't deserve anyone who has a backbone." Tyler looked at her for a long moment. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Rachel." He glanced down at his watch, then back up. "Rachel, how would you like to make $1,000 for one night?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I need a date," he said plainly. "A believable one. Tonight. For a gala. My ex-fiancée will be there, and I need her to think I've moved on. Spectacularly." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "So, you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend, just for a few hours," Tyler said. "You show up, look stunning, pretend you adore me, and then walk away $1,000 richer. No strings, no weird expectations." She stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you're the only person I've seen today who doesn't give a damn who I am." She let out a short laugh. "That's because I didn't know. Still doesn't change the fact that this is insane." "True," he said, "but I'm offering cash, a designer gown, and 5-star food. Worst case, you get a story to tell. Best case," he trailed off with a shrug. Rachel bit her lip. She had rent due. Her roommate had just moved out, and the idea of crashing a billionaire gala dressed to kill had its own strange allure. After a long pause, she said, "Fine, but I want dinner before the show." Tyler smiled, the first real one she had seen from him. "Deal." And just like that, the girl who poured coffee in the shadows stepped into a spotlight she never saw coming. The next afternoon, a black town car arrived outside Rachel's apartment. She stepped in, feeling both underdressed and overcommitted. She kept reminding herself it was just one night, just a favor, just a paycheck. The car whisked her to a luxury showroom in Soho, where she was immediately greeted by a flurry of assistants. Stylists, designers, and personal shoppers buzzed around her like a small army, already armed with mood boards and fabric swatches. Tyler arrived 10 minutes later, calm and unreadable, giving a curt nod before motioning her toward the racks of gowns. Rachel paused before one deep emerald dress with subtle beading, her fingers grazing the fabric. "Try that one," Tyler said behind her. She didn't respond, but took it anyway. In the fitting room, she emerged minutes later, tugging at the waistline. A stylist adjusted the hem, while another handed her diamond earrings and a matching bracelet. When she turned to look at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Tyler stood behind her, arms crossed, saying nothing. His eyes scanned her with clinical precision, until they didn't. For a flicker of a second, his gaze softened. He caught himself almost immediately, straightening his posture. Rachel noticed. "What?" she asked, half smirking. "Nothing," he said. "It'll work." She gave him a look, then gestured toward the glittering earrings on the tray nearby. "I'm not wearing those," she said. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "They're Van Cleef. I'm not walking into a room full of billionaires wearing something that could pay off my student debt twice over," she replied. "I'm just a prop, remember?" That silenced him. One of the assistants laughed nervously, then turned to Rachel with a polite smile. "Would you like to sit for etiquette coaching now?" Rachel rolled her eyes, but followed her to a small lounge where a former diplomat's wife began schooling her on posture, cutlery, and conversational neutrality. But halfway through the session, the woman paused, blinking in surprise. "Where did you study international relations?" she asked. Rachel blinked. "I didn't. But you just referenced the Doha Round and the UNCTAD report. Most people in finance don't even know what those are." Rachel froze for a fraction of a second, then smiled politely. "I read a lot." From across the room, Tyler narrowed his eyes, listening. Later, as the stylist tested hairstyles on her, Rachel casually muttered something about capital structure models and yield curves while scrolling on her phone. Tyler, seated nearby reviewing emails, looked up slowly. "Where did you learn that term?" Rachel glanced at him, the corners of her mouth twitching. "Google." "Right," he said, unconvinced. But she said nothing else, letting the silence swallow the moment. The transformation continued. Makeup, shoes, clutch, voice modulation coaching. By the time the sun dipped behind the Manhattan skyline, Rachel stood poised in front of the floor-length mirror in a midnight blue gown that shimmered with every breath. Tyler walked up behind her again. "You sure you're ready for this?" She didn't look at him. "I've waited tables for 5 years. I can handle rich people pretending to be nice." He almost smiled again. Almost. And somewhere between the diamonds she refused and the secrets she deflected, the man who brought her in as a decoy began to suspect he was the one out of his depth. The ballroom shimmered like a dream carved out of gold and glass. Chandeliers hung like constellations above them, lighting the sea of evening gowns, champagne flutes, and designer labels. The guests moved like dancers in slow motion, smiling too perfectly, laughing too carefully, always watching. Rachel stepped through the grand doors on Tyler's arm, transformed. Her midnight blue gown clung to her like it belonged there. Her blonde hair swept into a soft twist, framing her face like something out of a film. Yet, beneath the elegance, she carried herself with an unshakable authenticity. It was not the dress that made people stare. It was her. Tyler walked beside her, sharp and unreadable in his black tux, but his hand hovered just slightly closer to hers than before. Heads turned as they entered. People whispered. Some stared with veiled curiosity, some with jealousy, but none as sharply as Vivian Lancaster. Standing near the champagne fountain in a silver couture dress, Vivian spotted them instantly. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. She was stunning. Perfect posture, perfect poise, and the kind of old dunny confidence that only came from generations of never hearing the word no. "Well, well," she said smoothly, approaching them. Her entourage of heiresses trailed behind her like silk shadows. "Tyler, I did not know you were bringing entertainment tonight." Rachel smiled politely, unfazed. "Lovely to meet you too." Vivian didn't miss a beat. "And what do you do, darling, aside from accessorizing millionaires?" Rachel tilted her head, voice honey smooth. "Mostly I study patterns of socioeconomic shifts in post-recession markets, but I dabble in accessorizing." Vivian blinked. The group behind her fell quiet. Tyler's eyebrow twitched. "I'm sorry," Vivian said with a laugh too sharp to be genuine. "That's a rather ambitious answer for someone who, I assume, is more familiar with latte art than economic theory." Rachel's smile widened just a touch. "Actually, I find latte art a fascinating metaphor for micro-level consumer behavior. Ephemeral, intricate, and completely subject to human mood. Sort of like hedge funds." A beat of silence followed. One of Vivian's friends coughed. Tyler glanced sideways at Rachel, his expression unreadable. Vivian recovered with a tight laugh. "Clever. But let's be honest, dear. This isn't really your world." Rachel stepped a fraction closer. "You're right. This isn't my world. But from where I'm standing, your world doesn't seem particularly hard to understand. Expensive shoes, thin smiles, and a chronic fear of irrelevance." Vivian's jaw tightened. Tyler turned fully toward Rachel, watching her now, not just with curiosity but with something dangerously close to awe. A man approached, one of the senior partners from a banking firm, offering Tyler his hand and glancing at Rachel with interest. "Care to introduce us?" Tyler opened his mouth, but Rachel stepped forward with calm confidence. "Rachel, pleasure to meet you, Mr. Baring. I've read your recent statement on ESG investment trends. Bold stance on sustainable returns, though I'd argue your third quarter projections were overly optimistic considering current energy sector volatility." Baring laughed, clearly impressed. "Well, someone's done their homework." "Always," Rachel said smoothly, accepting his handshake with grace. Tyler watched her maneuver through the room, seamlessly engaging with people 10 income brackets above her usual crowd. She spoke with poise, grace, and a quiet fire that refused to shrink in the face of privilege. Later, as they stood by the gallery of rare art acquisitions, Tyler leaned closer. "You said you were just a barista," Rachel sipped her champagne. "I never said just." "And you know about ESG reports and sector volatility?" "I read," she said simply. He studied her for a moment. "Who are you, Rachel?" She looked up at him, eyes calm but guarded. Someone who knows better than to show all her cards at once. He smiled, genuine, rare. In that glittering room of legacy names and diamond-draped illusions, Rachel had not just held her own, she had quietly, effortlessly outshone them all. Tyler stared at the monitor, the search results lined up in front of him like pieces of a puzzle he had not known he was solving. Rachel Crossman, not Rachel Carter, the name she had given at the gala. Crossman. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, the name triggering a faint memory, then clarity struck like lightning. Victor Crossman. The name was legendary in investment circles, a financial prodigy turned pariah. 10 years ago, Victor had headed one of the most respected private equity firms on the East Coast, until he backed out of a hostile merger with Lancaster Holdings at the last minute. Weeks later, a scandal erupted, insider trading, market manipulation, regulatory breaches that had come from nowhere. His empire crumbled overnight. No charges ever stuck, but his reputation was annihilated. He disappeared from the public eye soon after, and now, his daughter was serving coffee 3 blocks from Wall Street. Tyler leaned back in his chair, the silence of his office pressing in. Everything about her, the sharp wit, the command of financial language, the guarded look in her eyes, it all made sense now. He stood and picked up his phone. Rachel arrived at his office that evening wearing jeans, an old gray hoodie, and a guarded expression that matched the chill in her eyes. The glint of city lights reflected in the glass walls behind her as she stepped inside, clutching her backpack like a shield. She had not expected to hear from him again so soon, not after the gala. Not after the look in his eyes when she had left the ballroom and all its ghosts behind. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, crossing her arms. Her tone was neutral, but her posture spoke louder. Tense, wary, ready to bolt. Tyler stood near his desk, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. He nodded once, motioning her in. "Come in. Close the door." She obeyed, hesitantly, the air between them thick with something unspoken. His voice was calm when he finally spoke, almost too calm. "I ran your name," he said. "Your real name." Rachel's breath caught. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she pushed the door shut behind her. Her back leaned against it for support. "I know who your father was," Tyler added, quieter now. "Victor Crossman." Her jaw tensed. No denial, no protest. Just a long, slow breath as she looked away toward the towering skyline outside the window. "So now you know," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Why hide it?" he asked, stepping closer, not accusing, just searching. Rachel turned to him, her eyes clear but tired. "Would you have brought me to the gala if I had told you I was a crossman?" Tyler paused, honesty flickering in his expression. "Probably not." "Exactly." Her arms wrapped around herself as she crossed the room to the window. That name used to mean something. It opened doors. People smiled when they heard it. Then one day, it started closing every one of them. Fast. She stood in silence for a moment, then added, "After the scandal, my father lost everything. His firm, his reputation, our home. We went from penthouses to basements in months. And he never really got back up." "Because of the money?" Tyler asked softly. "No," Rachel said, shaking her head. "Because of the betrayal. He trusted the people he thought were allies, business partners, friends. They used him as a shield, made him take the fall. The same people you probably play golf with on weekends." He stayed quiet, absorbing that. Rachel turned back to him. "I'm not trying to reclaim anything. I'm not here to fix the past or clear a name that no one cares about anymore. I just want to survive. Quietly. Without being pulled into a world that chews people up and spits them out." Tyler didn't argue. He didn't offer pity. He just walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small envelope. She eyed it cautiously. "What's that?" "Dinner," he replied simply. She opened it. Inside was a reservation card, handwritten, with her name. A quiet rooftop bistro. No event, no cameras, no performance. Her brows furrowed. "Why?" He looked at her, his voice gentler now. "This isn't about the gala. It's not about appearances or headlines. I just want to know you. No games, no pretending." For the first time that night, Rachel faltered. Something in his voice, steady, vulnerable, broke past the walls she had spent years rebuilding. Her chest tightened. She wasn't used to people wanting her for anything but her history or her usefulness. But now, she nodded slowly, the weight of the moment sitting carefully on her shoulders. "I'll come," she said. "But I'm not the girl you think I am." Tyler met her gaze without hesitation. "Maybe you're more." And in that quiet, window-lit room, for the first time since stepping back into the world that had taken so much from her, Rachel let herself believe, if only for a moment, that she might not have to face it alone. The deeper Tyler dug, the uglier the truth became. Cross-referencing internal documents, investment trails, and off-the-record conversations, he and Rachel unearthed a web of shadow entities, shell companies, fake subsidiaries, and consulting contracts that all pointed back to one name. Lancaster Holdings. Vivian's family. They had orchestrated the collapse of Victor Crossman and profited from it. "Maybe he gutted his firm," Rachel said, scrolling through a tablet at Tyler's apartment. "Then buried him in fake accusations and walked away clean. They used my father as a scapegoat." "They did more than that," Tyler said, leaning over her shoulder. "They made sure he could never fight back." He looked at her. "But we can." They spent weeks laying the groundwork. Rachel analyzed financial filings, investor reports, and leak patterns. Tyler used his connections to map out the structure of Lancaster Holdings, who pulled the strings, And when? The target. A high-stakes shareholders gala, where Vivian's father would unveil a major merger opportunity, a facade for another asset raid. But this time, Tyler and Rachel would be ready. The plan was bold. Rachel would pose as a financial journalist to gain access to a confidential pre-gala briefing, where the company's CFO, Grant Niles, would present sensitive data. The goal? Get into his unlocked phone, extract proof of collusion, and expose the paper trail connecting back to the Crossman collapse. "You'll have 3 minutes max," Tyler warned. "If they catch you—" "I know," Rachel said, "but I'm done being afraid." The Lancaster Tower was all glass, steel, and arrogance. Rachel entered the private lounge, where the pre-gala meeting was being held, dressed in a tailored blazer and heels that clicked with confidence. Her press badge read Claire Weston, Financial Pulse, a name borrowed from a defunct blog Tyler's legal team had revived for this very moment. Inside, executives chatted over cocktails, exchanging empty pleasantries while power shifted in invisible tides. At the far end of the room, Grant Niles sipped whiskey, scrolling through his phone. Rachel moved carefully, joining a small conversation circle. She made subtle eye contact, smiled, let herself drift closer to him. When he set his phone down to refill his glass, she made her move. Sliding it from the table, she turned her body slightly away and activated the data siphon Tyler had installed in a modified flash drive. 2 minutes, she muttered to herself, heart pounding. "Miss Weston, is it?" a voice said behind her. She turned to see a middle-aged VP eyeing her curiously. "I don't believe we've met. What publication are you with again?" Rachel forced a smile. "Financial Pulse. We specialize in trend analyses and merger impact forecasting." The man blinked. "That site shut down years ago." Her stomach dropped. Grant Niles turned, and then chaos. Tyler burst into the room, disheveled, flushed, and staggering. "There you are, darlin'," he slurred loudly, stumbling toward Rachel. "You left me in the elevator with the pianist." Everyone turned. Tyler wrapped an arm around Rachel's shoulders, grinning like a man who had started drinking hours ago. "My fiancée," he announced proudly, planting a sloppy kiss near her cheek. "Can't take her anywhere without her flirting with finance nerds." The room chuckled awkwardly. Grant reached for his phone, but it was already back on the table. Rachel smiled tightly, playing along. "I was just networking, sweetheart." Tyler nodded, wobbling theatrically. "Networking, right. Time to go before you start explaining derivatives again." He steered her out of the room, weaving a little for effect. Only when they reached the elevator did he drop the act, voice low and sharp. "Did you get it?" Rachel opened her clutch and handed him the flash drive. "Every email, every transaction, everything." He looked at her, pride and something deeper flashing in his eyes. "You were perfect." She exhaled, her hand still trembling slightly. "Let's bring them down." And for the first time since her father's name was destroyed, Rachel didn't just want justice. She was ready to take it. The lines had blurred. What had started as a performance now felt dangerously close to something real. Rachel could no longer tell where the act ended and where the truth began. The long glances that lingered a second too long, the shared silences that felt more intimate than conversation, the way Tyler's hand would sometimes brush against hers, gentle, accidental, but not unintentional. Each moment chipped away at her carefully constructed boundaries, and yet the echo of how it all began still haunted her, because everything between them had started with a lie. She sat beside him in the back of the car, the night silence pressing in. In her lap, the decrypted files from Grant's phone glowed faintly on her screen, spreadsheets, emails, timelines of betrayal and manipulation. But her mind wasn't on any of it. Tyler, seated beside her, wasn't looking at the data. He was watching her. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft. Rachel didn't look up. "Tired," she replied, her tone flat. Tyler leaned back, one arm draped along the back seat, his voice lower now. "You know, you never have to pretend with me." She closed the laptop and turned to the window. The city lights blurred as they passed. "That's the problem, Tyler. I don't know when I'm pretending anymore." He didn't respond right away. Then, after a pause, he spoke to the driver. "Can you take a detour? Uptown?" Rachel looked over, curious but too tired to ask. 20 quiet minutes later, the car pulled up outside a small, gated cemetery tucked behind a wrought iron fence and a row of sleeping trees. The snow had just begun to fall, soft, slow flakes drifting down through the lamplight. "Come on," Tyler said gently, opening the door. She followed him silently through the narrow paths, boots crunching on gravel. The wind nipped at her cheeks. They walked past rows of headstones, some old and crumbling, others new and polished, and then he stopped. Rachel's breath caught before she even looked. Victor Crossman, her father's name, carved into clean, cold marble. She stepped forward slowly, kneeling, brushing away leaves and a thin layer of snow from the base of the stone. It was immaculate, but empty. No flowers, no notes, no sign anyone had come to remember him in a long, long time. Until now. Tyler reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single white rose. He knelt beside her, gently laying it at the headstone. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "He raised a woman the world doesn't deserve." Rachel's throat tightened. Her eyes burned, but she did not cry. She had cried enough for 10 years. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I wanted to," he said. "You talk about surviving, about how the world forgot him, but I didn't, not anymore." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw past the suits, the power, the composure. There was a man who was trying, not to fix her, not to save her, just to stand beside her. They stood together in silence, surrounded by snow and memory, and something fragile forming between them. She turned toward him, just slightly, her body moving before her mind caught up. Tyler reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered, warm against her skin. Rachel's breath caught. Their eyes met, and the world went still. He leaned in, slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to stop him. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel his breath, warm in the winter air. Her heart pounded once, twice, and then she pulled back. "I can't," she whispered, voice breaking. Tyler blinked, confused but respectful. "Rachel." She stepped away, hugging her arms tightly to her chest. "I've already lost everything once," she said, not looking at him. "If I let this be real and then lose it too—" He didn't move, didn't argue. He simply nodded, the faintest shadow crossing his face. They left the cemetery in silence, walking side by side but miles apart. Nothing had broken, but everything had shifted. Something fragile had been uncovered between them, real and raw and terrifying, not erased, just waiting for one of them to be brave enough to reach for it again. The Lancaster Annual Shareholders Gala was the kind of event where secrets wore tuxedos and corruption drank champagne. Held in a grand hall lined with gold accents and crystal chandeliers, the room buzzed with powerful people exchanging pleasantries laced with silent calculations. Rachel walked in quietly, unnoticed at first, dressed in a sleek black gown, her hair pulled back in a soft wave. She scanned the room, trying to slow her heartbeat. Tyler had told her to come, but not why. All he said was, "Trust me." Then the MC called her name. "Tonight we have a special guest speaker, someone who represents the next generation of financial ethics and resilience. Please welcome Rachel Crossman." The room froze, heads turned. Rachel stood rooted to the floor for a heartbeat before she began to walk toward the podium, heels clicking against polished marble like a countdown. She caught Tyler's eyes across the room. He gave the slightest nod. He had done this. He had opened the door. Now it was hers to walk through. She reached the stage and took a breath. "Good evening," she began, voice calm but steady. "Some of you know me as someone new to this world. You might be wondering what I'm doing here. Let me answer that." She looked out across the sea of tailored suits and pearl necklaces. "My name is Rachel Crossman. I am the daughter of Victor Crossman." Gasps rippled. She continued, "10 years ago, my father was destroyed by a system he helped build, not by accident, but by design. He trusted the wrong people in this very room. And when he refused to play dirty, they made him disappear." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a slim tablet. With a single swipe, she connected it to the projector behind her. On the screen appeared financial records, internal emails, data leaks. Over the past several months, with help from some determined allies, I uncovered the trail, paperwork tying Lancaster Holdings and its associates to fraudulent shell companies, insider deals, and asset manipulation that deliberately targeted my father's firm. There was an audible murmur. Vivian stood slowly, face pale. "This is outrageous." Rachel turned to her, eyes calm. "You might want to sit down, Vivian. The SEC is already reviewing the data, and your family's name is on every transaction." Vivian looked at her father, who was already stepping away, whispering furiously into his phone. Rachel turned back to the audience. "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. My father died with the world believing he was a failure. Tonight, that lie ends." She stepped away from the podium. The room exploded. Cameras flashed, reporters surged forward, investors whispered, argued, panicked. Tyler met her at the side of the stage. "You did it," he said. Rachel nodded, her breath shaking. "We did it." Within hours, the headlines hit every major outlet. Heiress exposed billion-dollar scandal. Lancaster Holdings under federal investigation. The stock dropped by 12% overnight. And Rachel Crossman was no longer just the girl from a coffee shop. She was a storm the world had underestimated and remembered. In the weeks that followed the scandal, Rachel's name lit up every news feed in finance. She was hailed as fearless, brilliant, and, most of all, impossible to ignore. Job offers flooded in from firms eager to claim the rising star who had taken on a giant and won. She declined them all. Instead, she spent time in quiet reflection, rebuilding her peace, mourning her father in a way she never had time for, and trying to understand what it meant to finally be free of hiding. One afternoon, Tyler invited her to the Crane Capital headquarters, not to talk about business, but to show her something. He walked her into a sleek, glass-paneled office with a view of the skyline. The name on the door hadn't been printed yet. "Is this—" she began. "Yours, if you want it," he said. "Strategic partner. You'd help shape every major acquisition. You wouldn't work for me, you'd work with me." Rachel turned to him, unsure. "Why me?" He stepped closer. "Because I've watched you walk into rooms and change the energy. Because you're not afraid of truth. And because, Rachel, no one else has ever made me want to fight for something more than the next deal." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But only if I get the better view." He laughed softly. "Deal." That evening, he walked her to the rooftop garden above the office. The city glittered below them. The air was crisp, quiet. Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. She blinked. "Is that—" "Eh?" "Not a proposal," he said gently. "Not yet." He opened it to reveal a simple silver ring with a single engraved word inside. Real. This time he said, "No pretending. I don't want a fake date. I want the girl who walked in and turned my world upside down." Rachel's breath caught. She reached for the ring, sliding it onto her finger. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, "but I'm still not wearing Van Cleef earrings to coffee." He smiled, drawing her close. "Then I guess I will have to adjust." 3 months later, another gala. Another ballroom full of money and power and whispers. But this time, the whispers were different. "Is that her? She's the one who brought Lancaster down." Rachel Crossman. No, Crane's new partner. The real deal. Rachel walked through the room in a deep burgundy gown, hand in hand with Tyler. Her presence radiated quiet strength. Not because 37 of what she wore or who she stood beside, but because of who she had become. They didn't see a girl from a coffee shop. They saw a woman who chose truth over fear. And this time, when Tyler looked at her, there was no calculation in his eyes, only certainty, only pride, only love. Not the performative kind, but the kind that grows from honesty, from battle, from real beginnings, together. And that was the story of a girl who was never meant to belong in their world, but changed it the moment she walked in. Rachel Crossman didn't just rewrite her father's legacy. She reclaimed her own voice. And in a world built on illusion, she reminded everyone watching that the most powerful thing you can be is real. If this story moved you, made you believe in second chances, quiet courage, and love that starts where lies end, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here we tell tales that reach beyond the screen, stories of resilience, redemption, and the kind of love that stays with you. Until next time, keep believing in the unexpected, because sometimes the girl with nothing to lose, because the woman who has everything to give,